Hey, you would have just killed us. You'd have just killed us if that happened. I mean, I'm very specific. My wife would be more like, ooh, like she doesn't say anything, she just makes sounds.
Well, when I found out you didn't have brake pedals on the passenger side, that's when I got out, so. Hey, Jim.
Hey, everybody, can you hear me?
Yeah, nice to see you. I feel like it's been a while.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Dude.
Good.
Too loud?
Yeah.
Lindsay, welcome.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Hey, welcome. Welcome.
Are we missing anybody? Who are we missing? Stuart. Where's Stuart?
Do it.
Yep.
Saw him earlier today.
Yeah, we'll wait a couple of minutes, see if Stuart joins us, and then if not, we'll get started.
He knows about this meeting.
No excuses.
Today.
Jack's looking sharp tonight.
Yeah, I like that
I
jacket.
appreciate that. Haircut, sweater.
I feel underdressed.
I got cold, so I had to put something else on.
Well, we don't want to be here all night, so we'll just let Stuart join us when he joins us. So I'll call the work session to order, and we'll start with Chief Holyco's report.
Good evening. How are y'all doing this evening?
Good.
Doing good, yeah.
Doing well. How about you, Chief?
Good. I hope y'all had a happy Thanksgiving. So we'll start off with statistics. Matt will pull up what we have as far as the monthly statistics. I was a little bit dismayed until I looked in the proper place for my data. You'll notice that traffic summonses, I thought amounted to 3, but they actually ended up being 13 this month. We assisted the county with 26 different calls. Of course, you see the extra patrols, IBR reports. Total calls for service have reduced some, I think partially because of the holiday.
Mm.
Now we'll go to the auxiliary statistics. And you'll show there it's just the amount of hours that they put in, okay? And that is from the time that they first started working, which would have been July 1. The administrative hours reflect court time, computers being worked on. I can't remember, a couple other things John told me about. But he has put some significant time into upgrading the computers to the best that he can with the hardware we have. That being said, DigiTicket is up and working. All officers are now printing their tickets out inside the car on the new system we have. There are no handwritten tickets to my knowledge. They've not been turned into me. So at this stage of the game, all of those 13 tickets this month have been written on DigiTicket. I'm sorry, 10 were. 3 of them were written in hard copy. But it's all working. Everything's uploading to the court and uploading to Albemarle County, who then puts it in their New World system, which is a records management system. Seems to be on the up and up and moving forward. So I'm grateful for that. Vehicle pricing, you wanted some numbers. I've worked with the county on this and gotten some calculations for you. A brand new vehicle is going to total out at $54,905. That is basic vehicle, front bumper that you see wrapped around police vehicles, lights, a new computer in it, new camera, because we need to get rid of the custom cameras that we have in the two we've got and go with WatchGuard, because that's what we currently have in my vehicle and the truck. And that is actually, in my opinion, a better system, at least at this stage of the game. So if we're going to buy new vehicles, I think we should put the WatchGuard cameras in those cars. The marketing course is like $530. The basic cost of the vehicle is $34,682. With the bumper, camera, computer, marking, and then the lights and siren and everything, it bumps it up to $54,905. And that's a state contract. So it's an incredible expense at this stage, but it would be a vehicle that is similar to or mirroring what Albemarle County has, just our markings on it. You have any questions related to that?
Nope.
So I've got copies of quotes that they have. If you all want to come down and see me, or you want to set up a meeting during the course of the day to look at what I've got it all right here. Apparently somebody had some questions about the take-home cars, the benefits compared to the drawbacks. Without going into a great detail of what's in the cars, there's some sensitive equipment in there that we have to keep secure. And if we were to leave them down here with that sensitive equipment in there, it would be likely they would be broken into and that sensitive equipment stolen. There was an event with the Albemarle County Sheriff's Office not too long ago, I want to say 6 or 8 months ago, where somebody broke out a window in their vehicle and stole a rifle out of their car. Recently, there was a city sheriff's vehicle that's been parked down here in the Scottsville supply parking lot. Has been for some time. On his way to work one morning, the right rear tire fell off. All of the lug nuts, I say all of the lug nuts, all of the studs on that wheel actually sheared off. I was able to contact the service provider, which is colonial for them. That vehicle had been serviced 4,000 miles prior to this event. So if those lug nuts were left loose, service was provided, that wheel would have fell off a lot sooner. So the suspicion is that somebody tampered with that. That being said, when Tony, Officer Taylor that is, had his vehicle parked down here at the Exxon station for about a week because he was off and needed some maintenance work done to it. When he came back, he found the lug nut covers, one lug nut cover on each tire had been loosened or tampered with. He had the mechanics check them to make sure they hadn't been loosened. They in fact weren't, but those lug nut covers were not like that when we left. I've got several studies that were done several years ago that related to take-home vehicle programs that indicate that they're a good thing to have. My concern is the security of the vehicles. We don't have a secure place down here to put them. And then on top of that, law enforcement officers here lately have been targeted. Even the personal vehicles have had blue tape put on the rear bumpers, identifying them as law enforcement officers. Quite frankly, take-home car was a benefit from the start. They were hired with the understanding that they would get a take-home vehicle. Just for your information, I think it's a valuable asset. They have a bunch of equipment in there they'd have to remove. Every time Albemarle County does it, they take between 20 and 30 minutes to do it. That's to load it or unload it at the beginning of, and then the end of the shift. If they have to get a spare vehicle, it takes them that amount of time to remove the equipment they've got. This vehicle, in essence, is their home away from home because they have all their paperwork in there, computers, cameras set up for them. It's just, I can't explain other than my experience of driving a pool fleet. Every time you get in the car, you gotta wonder what's wrong with it because somebody else is driving it before you.
Hey, Chief,
Yes, sir.
just to go back to something you said, are you saying that there has been damage in the Scottsville area related to people just doing vandalism on the cars?
Our suspicion is the city sheriff's vehicle that was parked down here. Are you familiar with that Explorer that was parked in the Scottsville Supply parking lot?
Yes.
That vehicle was driven one day, probably about 3 weeks, a month ago now, to work by the deputy that's assigned that car. On his way into the sheriff's office for his work that day, at Carter's Bridge, the rear right tire or rear left tire, I can't remember which tire it was, actually fell off the car. It was determined, all of the lug nuts or the studs on that wheel actually sheared off. Okay? The only time you see something like that is if the lug nuts are loose.
The one thing I will say, Chief, and maybe I want to say this just to you directly is, you know, it's no secret that there has been a lot of national ill will toward police, and we certainly, or at least I'm 100% opposed to that in Scottsville. And when I would do anything I could do to keep it out of here. And if we have to do something as a town council, please let us know, because I understand people have opinions about many issues related to the police and what they do and how you all serve. At the same time, our job as the town council is to both keep the town safe and to keep you safe. And it doesn't help if you're in a situation where your safety is compromised. I mean, so long and short of it is, we need to make sure that you're safe. And the last thing that I want to do is anything that puts your officers at risk because of unfortunate behavior by people and other, you know, that's just not acceptable, so to speak. So please keep us apprised of that. I mean, we obviously want to be careful in how we address it, but at the same time, it's no secret that there's a lot of ill will out there, and we certainly, as a town, appreciate what you do, and we want you to do the best you can do to keep citizens safe and visitors safe. I mean, of people of all backgrounds, of all races, I mean, everybody, we want to be safe here. We don't have any vendetta against anybody. We just want everybody to be happy and have a nice time in Scottsville, and including you.
I have and will continue to, and I appreciate that very much. It just, I know that Matt sent me an email asking about what the benefits were and the drawbacks were to take home program for the cars, and I'm trying to share with you that benefit. I know that 20 years ago, the monetary value placed on that related to salary was $3,000. And that was 20 years ago. I don't know of a recent study that would give you another monetary number now in comparison to that. I spoke with somebody earlier today who gave me a different set of numbers that I can't dispute, but nor do I necessarily agree with. But it was significantly higher than that value. I can't tell you the importance of pride of ownership. And when someone's driving an assigned car, I know for me, I try to keep it as neat as I can, but it's got all of my stuff where I know where it is. And if you start driving a pool car, you don't know where all that stuff is. And that can take away from your attention sometimes. And that's not what we want. We want the guys to be comfortable. We want them to know where all their stuff is so that they use the least amount of time when they encounter a potential criminal or somebody who's just made a mistake and stop the bad behavior and move on the way. And again, the important thing is the safety of everybody. not just us. It's important to us that we're safe, but it's more important to us that we keep everybody else safe, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it's a function. It goes both ways. And again, I mean, your first job is to de-escalate anything, and then also is to try to make sure that you represent, you know, what kind of safety. I mean, ultimately, we want people safe.
That's the whole
Chief,
purpose.
I've got a question for you. The take-home program. What's the town's responsibility? What do we have to do something different or extra in relation to what we do now with regards to the police department if we have a take-home car program?
I'm confused by your question, Zach, I'm sorry.
Well, like, so can we just say it's okay for you guys to take the cars home, or is there some other thing that the town has to do to make sure that you can take them home?
No, I think as long as if the town agrees with that you have a take-home car policy, you give them permission to do that.
Okay.
Basically, if I give permission for another citizen to take my car and move it someplace, I've actually given him the authority to drive that car, and the insurance should cover him in the event he has an issue.
Mhm.
That has helped me in the past, but he's a town employee. So he really doesn't count, but it's like your own personal car. If you give someone permission to drive that car for a specific purpose, I don't believe we have any insurance issues. Okay? But as it relates to take our own cars, our guys only use them to drive back and forth to work. They're not allowed to use them for personal errands, for instance, unless, like for me, for instance, if I leave here, I'm passing Food Line, I'll stop in Food Line and get some groceries and then head home. That's the only personal use we can use.
Right. My other observation though is about the vandalism, and I don't know what motive there would be for getting after the cop cars, but we've also had vandalism at Canal Basin Square or at the Canal Basin warehouse, and so I'm sort of just disconcerted that there's more vandalism in town, which this might be a reflection of as well. And I know we also keep the town's truck outside. So the second thing that this is making me think about is, what do we need to do to improve security for town property? Given that we have some examples here of increased vandalism just around town.
So Tony's actually, Officer Taylor has actually done some research on some cameras and DVRs that we're interested in putting around the police department, just because we don't have any security. There's no alarm there, anything of that nature. Though that camera and DVR are actually wireless. My only concern there is if somebody has a device that can interfere with that wireless connectivity. But if we get enough of those cameras, I believe there's a way we can set it up to monitor those areas where we're getting this vandalism. That'll at least give us some idea of who's doing it, what time they're doing it, and possibly catch it. Okay? I don't know of any specific time frame where it's occurring, other than to think that they're doing it in the middle of the night after our officers leave for the evening. Can't swear that to be the case. That's just my opinion at this stage.
Aren't those cameras expensive?
Actually, the set of cameras that he is looking at, set of 4 plus the DVR is under $400.
How much?
Under 400.
I mean, it seems to me one is better than none, and you just need one to catch these guys. Or do you need them spread around in various different places?
Well, we're looking at putting it at the intersection on top of the jail where nobody can get to it. At the intersection there, monitoring the police department.
Yeah.
And then those other ones, there's various ones we could get. There's some from the Albemarle County that we can borrow that are, how can I put it? You can, can't think of it. You can set them up so they're not easily seen. That you're not easily recognized. And they're pretty good as far as catching a good picture of who it is. I mean, the pixels are high enough that you could probably identify somebody. The problem is it's at night, which makes it a little bit more difficult because the area they're referring to with that storehouse behind East Main Street Garage is very dark. There's no lights back there. So that would create an issue. So it might be something I could work out with the county that if they've got an infrared, they might be able to work that possibly.
Oh, are you talking about at the Canal Warehouse?
Yeah.
If
I
that's,
know at the Canal Warehouse, the neighbors have installed lights as well as cameras now, I believe. Motion sensor lights, but they're working on that. But I'm thinking mostly about town property. If it would also make sense for us to have something around Victory Hall, since we do keep a vehicle there as well.
so the town truck is not a police vehicle. So those aren't necessarily targeted. When I say vandalism to police vehicles, it's specific to those vehicles because of the current culture with the relationship, or I say relationship, with the interaction with police officers and some of the general public. I will tell you, most of the general public we interact with here are very supportive of the police department.
How many town vehicles have been vandalized? I couldn't follow it. Look, I thought it was the city of Charlottesville Sheriff's Department vehicle.
That's the only one that was vandalized. Well, and we say it was vandalized. They can't confirm that somebody did that.
Okay,
It's just highly irregular to put 4,000 miles on a car and then the lug nuts or the studs shear off. It just, that's beyond a reasonable belief that someone did be tampered with, if that makes sense, Jim.
yeah, I see. Well, it's good that no town vehicle has been vandalized. It sounds like an equal opportunity crime. You got one guy running around, potentially maybe vandalize the city car. If he's done it once, he'll do it again, probably.
Mhm.
And again, it's specific to police vehicles, law enforcement. So according to a recent report I read out of, what is it? Police and Security News, it's not just local law enforcement, it also falls within FBI and federal vehicles.
Right, but we're just concerned about the town, and I would say that by and large, the citizens of Scottsville have the highest respect for the police.
Right.
I don't think, that's my impression.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, that's mine as well. Jeff, did these happen in the last month and a half? These two incidents?
Yes,
And same with Canal Basin Square?
yes.
Canal, let's see, the Canal Warehouse is probably 2 months ago.
Okay.
Jeff, got a question about taking home cars. I think totally makes sense that you all should take those home. I know the way I think about it is I've got a work computer that's I take home with me, and I get much more work done on it than I do if I'm sharing a computer with somebody else. So I think I'd love to see make that happen for you all, because I think that totally makes sense. The only thing that I'd ask is if you all could think about a way to make up for those vehicles being out of town in terms of sort of passively enforcing the speeding laws. So I've noticed that when there is a police car down at East Main Street, people don't seem to speed down the road there, and the same when there's a police car parked up by the up on 20 by the automobile dealership. People don't seem to speed down Valley Street quite so much either. So if there's some way we could have vehicles there or do something else to make up for them not being there while you all take those home, that would be a big help, I think.
Okay.
I have a question. Do your officers keep a log from personal distance, mileage, wear and tear versus work mileage, wear and tear when using those vehicles?
I have not asked them to do that, so no.
Okay. That's something that might be helpful to consider moving forward, just to have a really clear understanding of, what's sort of in use to do the position and what's in use just to get to and from home.
Okay.
Thank you.
And depending on the location of a crime scene or an accident, even though they have regular shifts, it's conceivable they could actually go past a crime scene or vehicle accident en route to Scottsville to get their vehicle to go back.
Well, in essence, that's what happens when they're coming into work. Alan or Officer Barnett has done it. I know that Officer Taylor has done it in Buckingham County. And quite frankly, our policy requires that if they see an officer who needs assistance, that they should stop and render assistance or ask if he needs help, just because they have that vehicle. That's part of the understanding of the agreement.
Right.
I don't think I have anything else.
Any other questions for the chief? Okay, these are some things we need to be working on, so we will take those under consideration, and we'll move on to Chamber of Commerce, which that will be a short one because I can say that Linda has been very faithful in sending out the Scottsville Happenings newsletter and promoting outside activities like walking the trails at Van Cleve and supporting what our businesses and best we can. So that's the chamber report. Zach, you want to fill us in on the latest ARB stuff?
Sure. Let's see here. We worked with, let's see, where will I start? I'll start with the properties. 3 properties. The big one was the first home in my tenure on the ARB that's on the historic register that we worked with the new owners of to do some exterior improvements and updates. Tipton House, which is up on Harrison Street. It was a nice process. The couples moved to Scottsville from Oregon. In any event, so it was an interesting exercise in balancing historic preservation with the updates that they required. And we learned that in order to be on the historic register, you just have to demonstrate the house is real old. That's it. That's pretty much the deal. I was worried that like paint colors mattered or something like that. Turns out you just have to prove it's really old. But we worked through a really healthy process with our own guidelines, I think to everyone's satisfaction, and helped also teach the new homeowners about the historic overlay district, and they were keen to learn. So I was very pleased, and they were very pleased with the outcome of that process. The fence that's gone up by the Methodist Church, we rejected their COA and asked them to revise it to come back with a plan that fits the site better, that is more in keeping with the location, and they were amenable to that. So they're going to return with a different COA next month, hopefully, for us to review. I mentioned our design guidelines, which is what we use to evaluate COAs and to have discussion with property owners. We just updated our fencing guidelines because there have been 3 fences that have gone up recently in town, and we approved those as a board. Since they're guidelines, we can do that. However, Matt should share those with you now that they're up on the website, just so you can see the work we did. I think it was really good. We adapted guidelines from Middleburg, which is another small town, small historic district. And ironically, Matt told us that when he contacted them, asked if we could borrow some of their language, they said they were no longer using their language and updating it. So we are now using outdated Middleburg language. Good for us. But I think it puts us in a much better place than we were. And we also adapted it to fit our own context, sketches included. However, one thing that will require your review is the ARB's request to update our ordinance, which would ask that any fence in town built over 2.5 feet receive a certificate of appropriateness to be built. Currently, I believe it's at 4 feet, fences that hit 4 feet. and that are permanent. So fences over 2.5 feet that are permanent require a COA. That's what we're requesting. So we're going to forward that language to you soon for you to look at, because that does require a public hearing and council approval. The reason for this is because it gives us a way to work with more property owners around fencing. And because of the hills in town, if you get a fence that is over 2.5 feet, you very quickly begin to interrupt sight lines of homes, street views that begin to impact things that we as a historic district are concerned about, especially when it comes to the front facade of buildings. So we will get that language together to you, hopefully for our next, Matt, should we do that for a work session, Matt?
You can enter it in kind of the pipeline of new business now with your report. And we could advertise that public hearing next week and take action in January.
The ARB would like you to do that.
Okay.
Can we do that?
Certainly.
Great. Let's do that. Move that along. And then to sort of wrap up this whole fencing process that we've gone through, we're going to be sending out postcards as an ARB, our annual holiday greeting from the ARB, which will also include a picture of fences on the front and a little bit.ly and perhaps QR code to our updated guidelines so that people can access them. Because one of the things we are trying to do is like increase communication and keep everybody in the know. So if you live in the HOD, be looking for that. All right. What else? I think that's it. That's it for me. That was a lot of work. We did a lot of stuff this last month and a half, but I think the process we worked through is really good. I think everyone feels like we've got some really quality products out. So that's where we are.
Hey, any questions for Zach? Did the yellow house on the corner of Harrison and Bird, did they go through the proper procedure for that fence they put up in the back?
Yes, they were the first one we did.
Okay,
Oh, but here's a follow-up item though that pertains also to the Planning Commission, I think. One of the challenges that we have faced just like interpersonally on the ARB is just communication. And I don't mean that because like people don't like to talk to each other, but like the actual technical nature of communication with town email and personal email addresses. And it's kind of like become a thing where one member almost left because of the frustration between how his email was syncing with the town email. So that board member is remaining. But I've requested through Thomas to get him a town account so that he can use that. But it's also common for other ARB members to have ARB emails from the town show up in spam or something like that. So what I'd like council to consider, and it'd be good to get your feedback now, I think, is that if we have members who are appointed to our state boards and commissions, so the ARB and the Planning Commission, to just get them town email addresses. Thomas suggested, like, it doesn't even have to be a personal one. It could just be like ARB1, ARB2, ARB3, and then those can transfer as people come in and off the boards, and people can then link those to their personal accounts. But I think it would do us a great service to have it set up so that all of our state boards and commissions have their communication housed with the town in the town service. And then that can just streamline, I think, a lot of these issues that we're having just technically with communication. But I'd like to hear other thoughts about that.
I like the proposal. It provides an archive for future board members to be able to look back through information. The other thing is we sort of had a general email where everyone had a blanket events at Scottsville, and we all got copied on it blind, and that was challenging for responses back. So if everybody had their own town-sponsored email, it would help address that problem that we ran into with us just being on a general distribution list.
Hey, thanks, Zach. Eddie has been our temporary representative on the Planning Commission since Jim left. Eddie, you want to have any report for us on that tonight?
Well, I'll tell you, when I saw Lindsay there, I put my pen down and take notes.
I figure between the two of you, maybe we could have a good report.
Yeah, Matt told me I was off the hook.
Okay. Well, I'll welcome Lindsay, and next week at the council meeting, we'll make it official that she will be the council representative on the Planning Commission. But for tonight, anything from either one of you that you'd like to talk about?
No, I mean, we had a short meeting last week. There was one new special use permit that has been applied for. It's for 430 Valley Street. It is the ground floor commercial, currently zoned commercial, and requesting a special use permit to make the unit a ground floor residential with a home business. So that's something that we discussed briefly last week. And I think we're just gathering a couple of pieces of more information before did we schedule a hearing on it? I can't quite recall.
It is called for January 4th.
Okay. So we've got a hearing on January 4th, and that was the only new business.
Yeah. What's the address, Lindsay? I missed the
430 Valley Street. It's where Ohm Tattoo used to be.
Okay. Thanks.
Mhm.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you again, Eddie, for stepping in and taking that position temporarily. Any questions for Lindsay? All right, Thomas, treasurer report.
Matt, do you want to start this one? You are our treasurer.
Happy to. All right. We've got a fair amount of agenda material on financial matters a little further down. So I think I'll hold most of this for further discussion. But suffice to say, December puts us halfway through the town's fiscal year. So we're in a little bit better place to assess how we're doing so far in the pandemic recession. And the short version and the teaser for the later part of the meeting is that we're in good shape for the current year's budget. Town council made substantial cuts to the current budget out of concern for this economic situation. And what we've basically seen is that lines like our meals tax, which is our biggest one, the damage locally has not been as bad as what we were afraid it would be when we did this budget in May. We still have concerns for the springtime, but we're comfortable moving this budget a little higher and giving ourselves some project scope to respond to things that have come up during this year. However, the long-term economic news does not point towards a swift recovery. And when you have inflation in our salaries and benefits and ongoing project needs with cost drivers like what the police chief was discussing, it creates a gap in the future. So we're afloat and solvent just fine at the moment, but we have some long-term warning signs.
Okay. Any questions for Matt?
In terms of our capital improvement projects that we've been looking at, does this warrant sort of looking at those again?
Yeah, it does. And Government Services Committee was very helpful to all of the staff in trying to help figure that out. As we thought about what are the new construction capital priorities, we took a step back at basic maintenance, just sustaining and replacing the things we have. And how do we do that well before we take on anything bigger that's new? I did get some good news from VDOT that does not appear anywhere else in the staff report. I called them checking on capital projects. They have not communicated anything to me as far as contracting on our sidewalk grant so far. And I asked them candidly, are we on the hook for any money in this fiscal year? Because we're gonna have a hard time with a surprise bill for $10,000. And they said no. Their staff are doing a lot of different things right now. The contracting will be slow, and we won't expect to pay anything on VDOT sidewalks in this coming fiscal year. There won't be anything we have to do with them before July.
Does that also delay when we, because it's not, I feel like we keep sort of delaying our final decision making about moving forward with this project in some way. So then does that also mean that in July we can make some kind of final determination about the scope and timeline of that project? Or do we leave that?
It is not set in stone. So as we take up a design process with them and start the work, we still have some scope for changing that scope and economizing if we really want to. If you want to have the conversation about how can we connect point A to point B as cost effectively as possible, we can work through the design process and try to find efficiencies as we go. You can have the budget sidewalk or the deluxe sidewalk, and different places might take it on in different ways.
Yeah, I only ask that because if it sounds like our capital improvement projects is moving towards just sort of taking care of what we have, taking on an additional project of this scope does not seem practical or feasible.
And we have time in the coming 3-4 months to scope that out, certainly.
Matt, how long does the town have to give a final yes or no on the grant?
VDOT will send that contract within 6 months or so, and they'll want a council approval and signature at that time before they get to work on design. But they haven't even started that contracting process yet.
Right, and how long do you have to consider it once they send it?
That I don't know.
So we probably got a year.
Potentially.
Taking our time.
If you were really uncertain about the economy and wanted to see where things were going, you could take that time.
Okay. Well, that'll give us enough time for the vaccination program to really get up to speed and pretty much cover everybody. And
that counts for a lot too. It's related.
Okay,
thank you.
Any other questions for Matt right now? And the mayor's report. Mayor's been busy. Matt and I have met with Supervisor Donna Price a couple of times in the last several weeks, once here in this room and once on the phone meeting. We primarily talked about Albemarle County's projects, future projects, capital improvement things, and if there were any areas where we could overlap and join one another on that. She has not come back with anything definite that they have honed in on. They had about 24 different projects they were looking at. So again, we don't know exactly what they're going to settle on doing. Had a couple of meetings with the chief on various matters such as the vandalism and the take-home cars, and also they had a couple of citizens concerned about speeding on James River Road, so the chief has been monitoring that, and we've got a couple things in the works that to address speeding issues. I was happy to help with the tree decorating and the lighting ceremony a couple of weeks ago. And during that time, while we were decorating the tree, we met a real nice couple from Lake Monticello that were down here to walk the trails over at Van Cleve. And they had nothing but nice things to say about Van Cleve. And the only suggestion they had was if we can look into getting some kind of sign on Valley Street that makes it easier to find. Because they were a little hesitant about going down beside an appliance dealer's building to get to the park. But they told me they had hiked in the Rockies and they were big hikers and they just really enjoyed Van Cleve. So that's wanted to mention that to Dan. And also thank Dan for the, I hope everybody saw that video he put up the other day with the sunset in Scottsville, looking at the bridge. It was really a nice piece of work, Dan. Thank you so much. I tried to contact Clayton unsuccessfully on a couple of occasions to let him know there were still opportunities for him to serve the town if he so desired. couple of times I have met with Matt and Laura and Thomas, and we would get to that further on down the line, but talking about the future and what the future holds, with the way things are going right now. And the last thing I have done before this meeting was met with a panel to interview a prospective part-time police officer who used to be a Louisiana deputy sheriff. So that is basically everything I have done since we last spoke. You have any questions for me? Then I'll ask Mr. Bowling if he has any words of wisdom.
I don't know about words of wisdom. I try though. Lindsay, it's nice to meet you. I'm Jim Bowling. And if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them. If I don't know the answer, I'll certainly will try to find out. Okay. I assume Matt sent you the Freedom of Information Act, the Conflicts Act, and the Public Records Keeping Act. And in addition, he's told you about the requirement that within X days, I think it's what, 30 or 60 days of your appointment or election, I'll have to check whether you're required to take that FOIA, Freedom of Information Act course and the Conflicts of Interest Act course. But it can't hurt to do it anyhow. It's a short little thing, easy for me to say, but I actually went to the trouble of going through one of them. It wasn't too torturous. So welcome aboard. And if I can help you in any way, just give me a call.
Thank you.
I sent out to Laura a contract in the hopes that you can have a band for the 4th of July. It's who knows what the 4th of July will bring. It certainly looks better this month than it did last month, even though things are getting hot. But
Right.
take a look at that, Laura, and get back to me, and we'll see what's happening.
I saw that. Thank you ever so much for the recommendations.
And I don't know. I don't think we have heard anything back from the county about our obligation in the mix-up with the clerk's office and the probate tax fees. So no news there, I suspect, is good news. And lastly, I just wanted to see my impression of the town council's meeting with the Board of Supervisors was very positive, and there were a number of things that were what I categorize as no-brainers, would not take too much time or effort on the part of the county folks to accomplish. I just didn't know what's been done in that regard. Maybe Matt, you can help me out, because I'm afraid if you lose your momentum, all of a sudden it'll be next September and not much has happened.
Sure. Items like the mayor and supervisors meetings have led to some really good follow-up. I get a weekly, here's what's happening within the county staff email that I didn't used to before. We verified that all of our council members are on the Albemarle County newsletters now. So in terms of keeping posted with what's happening, I hope you're seeing the benefits of that connectivity. I have not joined up on any county boards and commissions additionally yet. Although if there are topic areas that council is interested in more representation, I'd be glad to pick those up. The Albemarle County staff contacts have probably improved a little bit since that meeting. Their economic development specialists, planners, and budget staff have all been very accessible. Like the mayor mentioned, the county set their top line priorities for capital projects. Those don't specifically mention anything in the town, but there are some areas that might be broken up to include us. The county board has a big category for greenways and blueways that has a lot of small projects in it. So we might be able to advocate within that.
So you think there's momentum?
It does feel good. It feels like an improved relationship for sure.
Have they stuck us on their website yet?
Oh, good point. I talked with someone about that suggestion. So I know who to talk to about that. Thank you.
It has been nice to have Donna come to town after their monthly meeting and sit down with Matt and I for an hour or so, talk about what they went over the night before. Any questions for Mr. Bowling?
Thank you. I was real encouraged by that meeting.
I want to add, Mr. Bowling, I know that Thomas and Matt also started to do a comparison of Scottsville to other locations in terms of similar size, similar staffing, those kinds of things that one of the Board of Supervisor members brought up. So that's in process too. It just isn't at the report level yet.
Yes.
I think they're gonna find you're pretty lean and mean.
Yes, that's what it shows so far.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to say thank you for your follow-up with the Board of Supervisors. And I also would say, please pass along all of our thank you to our supervisor. She has really done a good job in keeping in communication with you and working to keep us informed. So we really appreciate that.
Yeah, I think she's visiting her parents this week. She self-quarantined for 2 weeks, and then I forgot where she said they live. But
Myrtle Beach.
Myrtle Beach, that's right, Myrtle Beach. And one is 91 and one is 94, I believe. So she wanted to make sure she was safe before making the trip. So, yeah, anything else for Mr. Bowling? If not, we'll ask the town administrator if he has anything else he needs to bring up right now.
Can share a couple of small matters. And a couple of these may tee up for future work sessions. We've had a couple of good calls and outreach events from the local health district. They're working very hard on the continuing pandemic. They shared a count of 48 tests that they did at their last drive-through testing event in November. Thankfully, they did not detect any positive cases at that, so it was 48 no. But we're seeing rapidly increasing cases in the district as a whole, and our neighbors in Buckingham and Nelson County are seeing much higher case counts and now fatalities that they were not seeing in the summertime. So we're worried about that community spread.
Yeah, the evening news, ABC News showed on the Big Map, Virginia being one of 7 states with increasing hospitalizations right now. So need to be careful.
The news around the state has been about hospitals beginning to fill up. The Bristol, Virginia hospital, the Lynchburg, Virginia hospital getting close to full. So you all know that we in Charlottesville take the overflow and most severe cases from areas like that. So it's something that affects our frontline workers in our community very closely. With that in mind, the town never set formal guidelines around closures and maintaining our operations. But with the increased caseloads and the action of some of the school systems around here, we would feel a little more comfortable taking about a month and returning to being closed to the general public, call and make an appointment and put a poster to that effect on the door. Staff continuing to work in the office or from home, but limiting the general public availability. Is there any objection to that?
I have none.
Matt, when did we reduce that? Why did we reduce that? I'm just curious.
We had that kind of practice in the April through June period that was linked to the kind of business shutdown phases that were happening statewide. Since then, our caseloads have all increased, but we haven't shut down any more businesses, and it's been paradoxical.
I think our reopening also fairly closely aligned with when the city and the county were reopening their office buildings in some capacity.
That's what I'm wondering, just sort of what metric we're using to open and close.
Just one comment. Once you answer Zach's question, I have another question for you.
We haven't set those standards about what level of severity locally prompts us to shut down.
do we hear very much from any residents of Scottsville that we seem inaccessible at all?
No, we've had an occasional in-person visit here, a couple per day. But I think if that's posted at the door and we make appointments, we can meet outside or by appointment only. And I think we can meet our customer service needs, especially around the holidays.
Yeah, I think I would just say, since we keep public notes, that we would ask the citizens to make sure that they let us know if they feel it's difficult to be in contact. But Matt and Thomas and all in the office, I do think, just like I said to Chief, your safety is of high value and you need to recommend to us what you think is the best course of action.
I think
My only request is that there be a phone number and an email on both the outside door, and if the outside door is left open, the inside doors.
Absolutely.
I know that last time it did say you were closed, but there wasn't an alternate way to contact you. So that would be really helpful.
Yep, got it.
I was just going to say too, Zach's earlier question about what the standard is for opening and closing. We had, I think unofficially pinned to Albemarle or Charlottesville in the beginning of this, and that made sense. In discussing more sort of looking at how our operations work and where our vulnerabilities are with Matt over the last few months, the thing that's really stood out to us is just how thin the bench is here, that if we were to have a problem, it would pretty immediately cut straight to the heart of some major function of ours in one way or another. And so the county's ability to reopen with a larger staff, still provides them some insulation from that amount of immediate severe impact that I think we just maybe need to be a little bit more careful about.
Yeah, thanks.
The other small item that we've gotten some outreach from is from our friends at the Game Wardens. The Department of Game and Inland Fisheries is now called the Department of Wildlife Resources, and they have a budget problem. People aren't buying as many hunting and fishing licenses as they used to, and this department is trying very hard to maintain their infrastructure, facilities like the boat launch at Ferry Street, which that department owns. So to close their budget hole, they're adding a new program called an access permit. If you want to use that Ferry Street facility and you don't have a hunting or fishing license, but rather you're putting in a canoe or kayak, starting January 1st, you will need to buy an access permit, which is kind of like a fishing license, from the Department of Wildlife Resources. This announcement was pretty unpopular with the kayakers and canoeists of the state. But hunters and fishers seemed to take it pretty well, that everyone who uses the state facilities should pay a fair share. I have not seen a whole lot of outreach on this, so I think it's going to take a lot of people by surprise. But the conservation police are going to start enforcing it, especially as warm weather comes in the spring. With that in mind, I checked in on the paperwork for the town to begin acting as a retailer, selling these kinds of permits. When we're open to the public, I think it would be helpful because there aren't a lot of other places right nearby where you can buy a hunting license, fishing license, or boat access permit. It's pretty easy to set up as a retailer, and the town can keep $1 per transaction that we do. So that feels like a good customer service opportunity for us once good weather comes.
Matt?
Yes.
What's the cost of the river access?
They have a bunch of different pricing structures, from the day pass to the lifetime permit. And I haven't gotten through all of that fee structure yet. It's not high dollar by any means. It's less than a hunting or fishing permit. But they're looking for a little bit of buy-in where they didn't have it before.
If you go on the wildlife management area website, it'll list a whole bunch of different fees for using the wildlife management.
Yes.
It strikes me as very similar. There's been something like this before. If you wanted to go on a place like a wildlife management area, you had to pay a couple dollars to do something. It was an extra fee.
Right.
I
Is that
don't think, correct me if I'm
for-
wrong, Matt, I don't think that this is, oh, I'm sorry, Lindsay, go ahead.
No, please go ahead, Thomas.
I was just going to say, I don't think that fundamentally this is a change. I think that you always were supposed to have a fishing license or a hunting license to be on DGIF boat access land. What they sort of assumed was that everybody who wanted to be using their ramps would have one of those under their fishing license or under a state boat registration or something like that anyway. And what they found is that there's been a big increase in the popularity of this unregistered small boat access that's not for fishing, it's just recreational use. And so that was previously all unallowed, but they weren't really enforcing that because there was so much demand for it. So what they've done now is bring it into their regulations and create a license for it.
Exactly. So we'll have to explain that to folks who are used to just putting in.
Is that limited to boats and recreational vehicles? Does it also include tubing, and does it include the tubing companies?
Good question.
They're figuring out this structure now. It's not set. The way this is probably going to work is the outfitter will buy one permit for their put in. The other thing that's a little confusing about it is it's not a permit to be on the river, it's a permit to be on the ramp. So if you're putting in and taking out from private property, it doesn't matter.
And that would be our river livery here in town is putting in on private property at Hatton Ferry, and they have their own ramp at the campground here. So they would be largely unaffected by this.
Right.
I see.
Right. But it's a change that sort of went under the radar. I missed that it was coming until the DWR's first announcement last week. It brought up one other wildlife matter, just for quick update. We had a question about hunting in town, and the police chief and I were answering questions about no, you can't shoot guns within town limits, but it raised the question of bow hunting. And the town back in 2016 did pass ordinances around urban archery regulations. Those longer term on council might remember that. Some miscommunication happened. Those regulations never got posted with the game warden's office. So we weren't listed online as a place where you could safely do urban archery, and no hunting permits were being sold. Maybe come springtime, we could look at those regulations and make sure that they still hold true. But everything else the same, we just need to say to the game warden, yes, we do want to participate. We passed this ordinance in 2016, here it is. And next October, we'll be able to have archers hunting in town.
Matt, to clarify, when you say hunting in town, where exactly does that apply? For example, I'm imagining not Valley Street. But
Zach, they're gonna be sitting on your porch.
Right. I mean, like, anyway, but does it apply to something like VCNA? Or would we have to create a thing that would say, hey, because people are walking in VCNA, we don't want hunting in this space?
Right.
It's for private property, and it's only if some very large pieces of land is all that was for, but it was not for the park.
Exactly. You wouldn't want archers and hikers interacting. But if you've got 3 acres, 5 acres on the edge of town, that's a big enough parcel to bow hunt safely.
Hey, Zach, one reason that this came up, that was when I was still on the council. Next door to me, when High Meadows was a bed and breakfast, they were having some deer issues, and I walked out one day and there's a bow hunter over there next door to me trying to shoot deer. And that's when I sort of brought this up to the council, and we worked on this thing about deer hunting with archery equipment within the town limits. So that's how that came about.
Very good. And did they proceed to hunt?
They proceeded to hunt.
Okay.
I mean, you see this guy with the bow over there all the time. I don't know whether he ever killed any deer, but I didn't want him killing my deer.
Okay.
Right. So just to be clear, though, this already exists. Like, this is an ordinance that currently exists with the town right now.
Yes, the ordinance passed in 2016, but for some reason it's not published on the state website that lists all of the places that have this.
This
Yeah.
was a bureaucratic failure.
I'm not sure that it's the biggest thing in the world that we weren't on the list, because going back to your point, Zach, there's not that many places you can actually do it. And
Yeah.
even being somebody who's a hunter who has a piece of land that's large enough to do it, I don't know that I would ever recommend doing it here, only because there are safety issues also, and it is something that
Yeah.
it is something that is, people, if you have a weapon, it's a weapon. And so you want to make sure that people are safe with it, and it is worth us knowing it. I don't know if we want to keep track of people who actually do it, but I don't know. It might be helpful to know that there are, if people are actively doing it, might be helpful to know that.
Well, and I also think that if we are going to advertise that you can hunt in Scottsville, that we do post in places like VCNA that you cannot, because
Yep.
I think people are going to see that and say, "Sweet, I'm going to take my bow down to this huge forest."
Well, to
You
hunt,
know, so I think if we promote, if this gets corrected, I think we will definitely need to want to consider postings about where you can or cannot hunt in town.
well, just one other thing to clarify. In Virginia, to hunt, you're supposed to have written permission from the landowners. I mean, that's
Yes.
so that's a standard practice. So it's a pretty high bar to. I do agree with you that it would be wise to put a sign that said no hunting, but it's also implied in everything else we have.
Yep. I'll be glad to put that on a springtime work session schedule as we work on outreach for the summer, and maybe take a look at that ordinance and check in on, is what we did 4 years ago what we want to keep doing.
Any other questions for Matt? I don't want, even though it's not on the agenda, I don't want Eddie and Stuart to feel slighted. So let me ask Eddie, is there any additional information from any recent public safety meetings that we should know about?
Well, Chief Bullwinkle usually covers the Public Safety and Health Committee when he gives his report. This past Monday, we did have a meeting actually at the fire building, and Chief Bullwinkle and one of his officers was there, as was Mike Grandstaff from the fire department, and myself and a private citizen. Jeff, we just had a basic discussion, most of which Jeff shared with you all concerning the police. Fire was represented, but they had no questions or issues for the town, and rescue, as usual, was not represented. Just a couple of things, if I could. Since there seems to be a new vaccine out today, thank goodness. I hope it gets widespread nationally, and all those who want to take advantage of it do. And I'm just wondering, since the front line and first providers are going to be the ones, and the elderly and those with underlying health conditions will be the first to get the vaccine. Do we have to do anything else as a council or town to offer or pave the way for our police department to be some of the first to get it in the community?
I was very happy back in September when the County Emergency Management Office, working down from FEMA, collected a head count from us. What's our number of first responders and essential government staff, so that they could count how many vaccine doses are represented in each of these tiers. So when it gets past hospital workers and vulnerable nursing home residents down to first responders and the first layer of essential staff, that's going to include our police and our volunteer firefighters. So we got that tally in and checked with them.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Another thing, good, Matt, you could probably help me with this. We still have to replace one of the police vehicles, and there was discussion tonight about a $54,000 new vehicle. Is the used vehicle that we've been talking about for a couple of months still available, or is that still in the mix?
It is still available. The recommendation of mine is to go ahead with the new and do that with the Agriculture Department's grant and loan program. So they would grant, of that number that Mr. Volwinkle gave, they would grant 41,000, and we would be on the hook for a loan of 13,000. And then we'd pay off our existing loan. So our total amount would be financing, would be 15, or pay off 2,000 up front and finance 13. It's still cheaper than the used vehicle and you get a new one. So that would be my recommendation.
Right, at the time last week, I believe, we did not know, whether the grant would be available or the amount, I believe.
The grant program is active. So that's an application we can take on now if that's your preference.
And could I deviate from public safety just for a minute to make a comment about the Board of Supervisors meetings lately, or should I wait?
Oh, you go ahead right now. You've got the floor.
Thank you, sir. I attended Supervisor Price's Zoom town hall meeting recently, and it was scheduled for 2 hours, but I only went 1 hour. And a lot of the good topics came up, but I was a little discouraged that there was not more participation. There were probably more people from the town of Scottsville in attendance on the Zoom than there was the overall general public and the rest of the Scottsville district. So I'd like to see a better turnout there. Having said that, I have not addressed the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors as a town councilman. When I do address them in their chambers, I just do it as a private citizen. And even though we've had good meetings lately and are starting a lot of communication that had gone by the wayside, on a personal basis, the 4 subjects that I've approached them with over the last 5 years, they have not had the courtesy to get back to me on any of them at all. One being the continuing deterioration of the Mountain Vista Road, specifically the intersection at James River and Mountain Vista. It's getting worse and worse. We've already had 1 tractor trailer accident there the year before last. Secondly, I addressed them in their chamber concerning becoming a sanctuary city. I got no response, no answer, no feedback. Third, when it came to Scottsville a couple of years ago, and I'm not beating a dead horse, but they chose to go behind closed doors and discuss the closure of the rescue squad that affected every member of our community. And fourth, speaking of the rescue squad, it's been 10 months since we as the council asked, actually I represented myself as a private citizen, but I went to their chambers again and asked for special recognition for a 30-year EMS member that had recently passed. Well, all 4 of these, as a private citizen addressing the Board of Supervisors, no response, no feedback. I'm a little disappointed there.
I can imagine your feelings, and what I would like to do is next time, I don't know if we'll be doing it this month, but I know we'll be doing it in January when we have our sit-down session with Supervisor Price. I would like for you to sit in on that.
She's well aware of all 4 of these. I've talked to her about them. In fact, she's the 3rd supervisor that I've talked to on 2 of the issues. So she's well aware of this. We had lunch together and talked about it.
You still sit in on our meeting. We'll bring it up again.
There you go.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, sir. Anything else that we can do? for you tonight? Let me ask Stuart if he has anything on economic development he wants to mention right now.
Not a whole lot. Started working with someone who I think can help me start to develop some more specific action steps for the economic development plan, but don't really have anything specific or in that area yet.
Okay. Matt had to go in the other office for a moment, so I'm a little confused about under new topics, planning commission reports and vacancies. Obviously, we have a vacancy on the planning commission now since one of their own is now with us. And again, it's nice to have Lindsay with us, and our council has all the chairs filled at the moment. So let me ask Matt, who's back. What is this under new topics, planning commission reports and vacancies?
All right. As, beg your pardon. Make sure this laptop didn't go dead on me. The planning commission is shorthanded one member. So they talked about that recruitment at their past meeting. They're happy to start getting the word out and make a recommendation on membership. If that's the pleasure of the council, they have a 2.5-year term available that they're recruiting for now. And you mentioned some outreach that you had done already.
Yeah.
But if other folks know,
I will try Clayton one more time. That's going to be it. Okay.
The public hearing is coming up for next week for this council. You've got an advertised public hearing on 2 special use permits. The 350 Valley Street, the Airbnb transient lodgings upstairs, and the 153 James River Road, the car wash and drive-through. Just wanted to mention, as the developer checked in on that one, the planning commission recommendation did include one condition, which was a review after 5 years related to the security systems and any nuisances related to 24-hour operations. So as the matter comes up, that was the recommendation that planning commission had. Town council could, of course, modify that recommendation, that condition, put other conditions in place. If there are any conditions that you would like staff to research as part of that negotiation, certainly let us know so that so we can have that ready for you. The other public hearing matter is the West Downtown Small Area Plan. Extensive public engagement process going into it to the recommendation, but I haven't heard much more about that since. And as Mr. Munson mentioned, some of the economic development type recommendations on that we're already acting on. But I look forward to talking more about that.
Okay. As I mentioned earlier, we've had a couple of meetings between Thomas and Matt, Laura and myself, and I'm going to turn things over to Matt and Laura, because the government services has done a tremendous amount of work on the future of Scottsville. So let me just turn it over. Which one would like to start? Cover what we have done. Laura, you want to tell the rest of the group what we've basically done over the last several meetings?
I'm sorry, but if we could,
It's my son. Hold on. Peter, please stop.
Could we just keep this to the agenda order that we have here for my sanity and trying to make these minutes for later?
Okay.
Okay.
So Matt, why don't you speak to the audit?
Okay. I was very happy last week to get fully caught up on audits. We were a couple of years behind on those annual financial reports when I started work with the town. And so we were paying for 2 years worth of auditing in 1 year for a couple of years. And happy to say that now we're back on the proper schedule. It should be council's expectation that when the town staff completes a fiscal year in June, that we proceed promptly to that audit and that we understand how that book closed out around this time. A Christmas time audit or even a Halloween audit provides good transparency and follow-up so that you know that everything's in order and where we stand in the year. So that audit, was clean with respect to government accounting standards and internal controls. The Government Services Committee read that audit closely and has some more conversations for the auditors about things like pension liabilities and capital depreciation. And I really appreciate the close reading to that audit. It's possible that this audit firm, in working with the town over several years, has gotten to relying on outdated information. And we want to make sure that they're giving us the most up-to-date reports on some of those topics. But if we've changed things and they haven't heard about it, the audit is begun to drift off a little bit in areas like depreciation and pension. So I'm glad to be working with Government Services Committee, putting fresh eyes on the audit report. The most notable finding from last year was end of year spending going over budget in a couple of categories, but the biggest of them was $12,000 in police department. That's not supposed to happen. The budgeted categories represent maximum spending. And if we incur a cost related to a vehicle repair or equipment and supplies purchases in this case, that should have a supplemental appropriation. So expect to do mid-year or year-end appropriations. As staff report to you, we think we're going to max out this budget. The proper response is either to amend that budget and appropriate a little bit more money, or lock down, don't do that work if it's discretionary, or don't pay that bill if it can't wait until July 1st to pay. So with that in mind, I'm providing a current year budget update that lets us know where we're standing with regard to the budget reductions that you adopted in the current year. That's where that audit stands, and I'm glad to have it at this point so that we can make those kind of course corrections. Can I answer any questions about the audit and our transparency and financial controls? Good. Jim's trying to talk. Jim's,
I just want to say, Matt, that you and Thomas and whoever else was involved really did a marvelous job in getting the county, the town caught up with its backlog in the audit area. It was somewhat alarming that the town had fallen that far behind for a number of years, but it wasn't easy to do it, but you're to be congratulated.
Thank you very much.
Related to that, getting some of these financial policies more clear, Government Services Committee has been helping us extensively finalizing those financial policies. These are the set of rules that are not specified in state law and not specific enough within the general government accounting standards about what are our rules of the road for handling town funds. There's enough that's not in the law and not in the treasurer's job description that we want to provide a little more guidance both to staff and to council of what you can expect for financial guidelines. So Government Services Committee recommended out this product last week, and I find it to be very helpful. It does basic financial items like defining capital. We didn't have a good definition of what capital improvement was. Putting that audit standard in there so that council can see it of when the audit comes due. Establishing the timeline for when your town administrator presents a recommended budget. How do you do that so that you can have proper budget review and complete your budget adoption as legally required before June 30th? Maintaining a minimum cash balance. The town has healthy cash reserves now, and we always want to have enough money in the bank to clear our biggest checks. Even requiring the monthly financial report that we deliver. It's vague in the town charter about what kind of financial information needs to be brought to you every month. So specifying that a little bit seems to be helpful. A commitment to competitive procurement. The town, being very small, is exempt from the Virginia Public Procurement Act. We don't have to take multiple quotes for everything. It's not illegal if we sole source or just go down the street to buy everything. So putting a little bit of a standard that makes an effort to support small businesses and local businesses, but also comply with state RFP guidelines for larger projects and where we have the capacity to do it. Finally, related to our investments, we have a state law limit around 10% debt. We have a debt ceiling, but we want to put a commitment in our policies to investing in infrastructure, having a standard for capital investment within our budget, and importantly, using grants, but maintaining an administrative cost share for our grants. Grant applications and compliance are a fair amount of work, so it's helpful to put a standard of 5% of our grant revenues come back as administrative cost share. And we put that in place and make it part of how we approach big grants, especially. And that might make it more possible to have, for example, part-time staff support on grants in the future, or at least making that part of how our police and admin budgets work, that grants don't become more trouble than they're worth because of the overhead cost. So Government Services recommended this document. It's included in your packet, and I find it super helpful to have this kind of guidance.
Any questions up to this point from that?
No, do we as council have to approve this, or is this just something that we can use now?
Yeah, so Government Services recommends that this go before council for official adoption by council. So would love to hear, feedback or suggestions, tonight for discussion, and if there aren't any, to then put on the agenda for official adoption this month.
Yeah, I like the way all these things sound. I especially appreciate that even though we're exempt from some state law, still making an effort to do it. I think that sounds responsible and good, because I know we've come up with that a couple, because we're also in a sticky spot of even finding multiple quotes sometimes. So it is nice to have that flexibility, but it's good to set a higher bar for ourselves. So I'd be content to put this up, for approval. I guess we can do it next week. Do we have to announce, do an announcement and all that, or?
It's not an ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like a great document. I love that it defines some of the terms that we've been using that we haven't really defined so far. So just that in and of itself would be really useful.
Right.
Okay, and then I'll hand it off on the longer term piece. But here, with 5 months of data on the current fiscal year, we have a better understanding of where we stand with our pandemic budget. We're working in the smallest budget that the town has had in at least 4 years now, as we made significant cutbacks to this budget, faced with a recession that was falling fast and we didn't know where it was going to go. Remember, April was the worst month for jobs that the feds have on record ever. It was worse than any month in the Great Depression. And the second quarter of American GDP growth was the worst on record. It was worse than any quarter in the Great Depression. Some of that has rebounded, but it's happened slowly. So faced with that bleak data, the town balanced a budget at $540,000, which was a reduction of over $100,000 from the year before. That was a balanced budget that didn't draw down our reserves. We have a rainy day fund, and that rainy day fund is not touched. Then in August, the town received $100,000 of CARES funding to use for pandemic related work only. The real difficulty in that initial guidance from the Treasury was that we couldn't use the CARES money to replace any of the budget that we had cut. We had to do new things that would help with the pandemic. So we had a couple of meetings and appropriations setting up those projects. And those are by and large done. The community center, teleworkspace, small business assistant grants, food pantry support, all very close to being complete now. We did just recently get some Treasury Department guidance that pushed back on the initial decisions of theirs a little bit. They heard it from localities all over the country that first responders are carrying a special burden during this pandemic, and police department fire and rescue funding was really in danger. So the Treasury Department listened to that and provided updated guidance that lets us use basic CARES funding for the base salaries of public safety staff whose work is related or dedicated to the pandemic. And that is defined as all police departments. So I have the recommendation for you that any unused CARES funding at this point, which is about $6,000 out of the 100,000, that we pull that back into our police budget and use it to hold up our base salaries. Otherwise, we would be in really tight budget pressure here this year. We have some good news on it. Meals tax is not doing as badly as we thought it would. We have business license not doing as badly as we thought they would. Sales tax doing better as well. So in your work session packet, we identify a total of about a net of $60,000 of either unexpected revenue coming in or just the drop not being as bad as we thought it'd be. On the other hand, we've also not been able to meet all of the expense cuts that we hoped for in this fiscal year. Things like with the development activity that we've had, the ordinance changes, we've been spending a lot more on public notices and advertising. We have new enrollments in our health insurance employees whose families are affected. Maybe the spouse isn't on the insurance anymore, so the employee and the spouse are eligible. So we're paying significantly more on health insurance premiums. Of course, we've had repairs and replacement of police vehicles. And if your recommendation is to proceed with the police vehicle replacement, that's something that we can complete this year. We can set up the USDA grant and loan program and get that vehicle at the total cost of $55,000, but the grant would be $41,000 and the loan would be the other $13,000. So we might only pay $2,000 to pay off our one loan and a few hundred for a couple months of interest on the other. We completed some unexpected capital work with vehicle repairs and the farmers market pavilion, and unexpected expenses like the front doors at the municipal building when it was open as a community center. We had zeroed out our budget for portable toilets because we didn't think we were going to be having these events, but it turned out that the public was here for Bateau Festival and 4th of July. Even though we weren't running an event, we realized we had the obligation to provide them portable toilets, so we incurred those expenses. So on balance, I think we can keep this balanced without use of reserve funds, but I have the mid-year budget amendment recommendation of a total of $60,500. We've identified the same amount of new revenues and savings against the expenses that we've either already incurred or foresee coming and not being able to avoid. So I'm happy to discuss current budget now. What this would do on balance is take us from the $540,000 back up to just over $600,000, which is still less than a normal year's budget, but not as severe of cutbacks as what we had back in May. Does that make sense?
And I would still point out that 600,000 is still incorporating the 100,000 of CARES funding. No?
We were at 540. We were at 540 in May. Then we had 100,000 come in for CARES. So 640, and then this would go to 7.
Take 100,000, gotcha.
But 100 of that is one-time projects that wouldn't repeat.
Right, that's what I was going to highlight, but
Yep.
I see you already had. Thank you.
Matt, can you remind me where we are with the big payment that we owe the county because of their accounting problem? Do we still, what's going on with that?
Mr. Bowling addressed that when he said we haven't heard anything and no good news.
Okay,
Good news.
okay. I wasn't just, okay.
We're not gonna call them up and say, hey, what's going on with this?
No, I'm not suggesting we do. I just wasn't sure that that's what he was talking about. Okay.
Maybe,
Write him a check.
yes,
They
sir.
haven't forgotten about it.
Yeah.
The chief was reminded by somebody in the finance department a couple of weeks ago that whether he had something that was due the town of Scottsville, whether they should deduct that from the debt. I think Matt said he straightened that out.
Yes, we did. That was the vehicle license fees that they were perhaps considering withholding to begin payments against that debt. And they reconsidered that and have released the funds.
Yeah, as I'm looking here in our packet, it seems like the item for action that looks like we do need to consider here is what we're doing with our late penalties that we've waived for meals tax and business licenses.
Yes, thank you. Back in April, we as an early emergency action, we waived all of the penalties and interest on those business license and meals tax. What we found was that every meals tax client has continued to pay along the same behavior that they did before. They have not gone in arrears 6 months on meals tax, or the ones that are occasionally late have continued to be occasionally late. There is several $1,000s of business license that was due in March that we never collected. And now we're coming up on another year of business license. And we're worried that folks are going to fall 2 years behind, or we're going to have a serious problem balancing our budget if we can't collect this. So I might suggest that with all of the assistance out there and other resources, maybe the worst of the fiscal emergency has passed, and it's time to collect that business license money.
If I could just provide a little context on the business license here, which I think is maybe the bigger question, because as Matt pointed out, the meals tax accounts, continue to just move that money through their accounts and pay that on time. Lindsay, just for a little context, the meals tax is not a tax on the restaurant owners. That's on your bill when you buy food from them. And so their job is just to hold that in escrow essentially and move it through. The business license, the outstanding amount that we see from last year, I would say is a little bit higher, but not too far off from the normal stragglers that we see year to year. And we've just essentially left them alone for this year. If we move forward with no penalties or interest, we might see similar behavior to what we've seen in the meals tax, which would, for instance, I would think Food Lion and some of our larger corporate accounts would continue to pay that bill regardless of what we've done with penalties and waivers. And I think that would probably take a large chunk out of what we've expected to receive from that revenue line. But it puts us administratively in a little bit of a tight spot about how to go forward in discussions with everybody else about outstanding licenses, outstanding fees and penalties. This is about the time of year where I need to be mailing out the renewal forms for everybody and would like to have clear guidance for them on what's due when and what the penalties are if they don't.
To put it in some historical perspective, the town used to have a real problem with business license taxes and with a large deficit each year. And slowly but surely they've chiseled that away, so it isn't a large problem anymore.
Well, and that's good to know as well, because I do want to respect and appreciate that I have inherited here what may well represent a lot of hard work that someone else has done. And I can't necessarily speak to how quickly that might go back the way it was if that work is left undone.
Yeah, I mean, we originally did this to provide people with some flexibility for their own planning, so that they could figure out where they sat financially, so that they wouldn't have to be hard up for money that they didn't necessarily have at the time. But it does seem that since the meals tax has been coming in consistently, and I am concerned about people getting strung out too far and then still owing money, and then we're coming after them for two things or whatever. And then us not balancing our budget. So I'm comfortable rescinding the waivers to try to get us back on track. And to your point, Thomas, consistently communicating with business owners about what they owe the town and when.
Any other comments?
I have a question. Since we're in the emergency order and we waived late fees and allowed flexibility for payments, at the point that that emergency order ends, is everything suddenly due, or is that another discussion that council would have to determine those payment dates and timeframes?
That's a good question.
That's another discussion.
It is, okay.
Yes.
What I'm thinking is it would be good to ask those that haven't paid on time, the stragglers, or those that show those tendency, encourage them to pay on time, but to still, as of like this month, not penalize them if they don't get it in. But that we do definitely as a council need to start maybe that discussion ahead of time as to when our ideal date is to have those payments. So it's not a month notice on businesses, but that we're having a discussion in advance.
Would waiving penalties and interest be enough of an incentive for these people to pay their business license fees?
Well, as it stands now, yeah, all penalty and interest has been waived since March.
Right.
So they have not been incurring any, a lot of these are our smaller accounts. And so even if we started the clock on those, in January or February or March, it wouldn't be going up that quickly. Jim, I guess there's a bigger question in there for you about how this freeze worked. I think the language of it was that we set these things not to accrue for the period so that when it comes back in January, it's not as if, or, say in March, it won't be as if they had 12 months of past fees that all of a sudden come due.
That's correct, Thomas, and that's a good explanation.
Right.
You waive the penalties and interest, they're gone until you put them in effect again.
Right, okay.
It is worded to expire automatically at the same time the emergency expires, but council also has the right to rescind it or amend it earlier.
And of course, that's the governor had to lift the emergency order. And just by some of the reports I've heard, I believe he'd be reluctant to do that until, June at the earliest. That's just, what they're saying this week, changes day to day.
Yeah, if you think your emergency is not over until a critical mass of people is vaccinated, then we got a few months yet.
Yeah, realistically, June, from different sources I've read and heard, but like I said, it's subject to change. I don't know what they base their findings on.
Mm-hmm.
Do we
Yeah,
have
I feel like we're gonna want to collect these business taxes before that. That's why I don't really want to tie it to the emergency, because we don't know. That's something we don't know, but we do know when the fiscal year is going to end.
Yeah.
So,
Right. And we know we have a budget to plan.
Yep.
Do we have any sense for whether the people who are straggling are doing so because of a financial difficulty, or are they just the same people that are the same businesses that straggle every year?
Well, that's why I say sort of, it is largely the same amount that we see kind of straggling every year. It is straggled a little bit longer than usual. I mean, I would have normally tried to have this tied up by June and would have maybe expected to see a smaller amount carrying through to the end of the calendar year than what we have right now. But I would say the whole amount that's been frozen, looks like what I would have expected to see as the stragglers 3 months after they were supposed to have, after they were supposed to have submitted all this in early March. So,
would it be possible?
Yeah, to the hardship, I can't say. Sorry.
Okay. So would it be possible to take a look at these on a case-by-case basis to get a sense for, whether these businesses are ones like restaurants that are reasonably affected, we can reasonably expect would be affected by the pandemic? Or are they businesses like the hardware store and, Doug's, which are, booming business now because everybody's,
Right.
doing a lot of home repairs. So I guess what I'm asking you is there some way, can we get a sense for whether this is the people that are taking advantage of this are truly experiencing economic hardship? And if so, then I would be much more inclined to, be more lenient with them than I would be if they're not.
Sure.
You can't, you can't do that.
No, I know we can't, but when we decide what we're going to do, we can certainly take that into consideration. So
You can't say, you're trying hard, we're gonna waive your penalty and interest, and you're not trying hard, and we're not.
Understood. And I'm not advocating doing that, but what I'm advocating doing, what I'm advocating we do is when we make a decision for everyone, we look to see whether those, that we base our decision on whether, the majority of those folks, those businesses are experiencing economic hardships or not. And
I think
if
that
the
we
majority
could.
are, then we extend it for everyone. If they're majority or not, then maybe I would be less inclined.
I think we could try to get a sense. I would also just say our standard policy, whenever somebody needs some amount of leniency from us in the case of back collections, is that we enter into a payment plan and sort of lock the penalties and fees in place at the time that we have signatures on when that payment plan begins. So you don't continue to accrue interest and penalty once you're under that and are actively making payments to us. And so with no penalties having accrued since we put this ordinance in place in March, I think with enough outreach, we could say to people, we need to complete your business license now, or the penalties are going to come off at a certain date. If you need help, come to us and work out that payment plan before those penalties go into effect, and we'll lock it in place with no penalties and, and get you your business license on a payment plan. And I think that we could do that. That would be easier to do, frankly, than the meals tax, where that meals tax is going to continue to accrue every month. This is, the one-time annual fee. Annual fee. I would feel very comfortable putting people on longer-term payment plans for that to make it less burdensome.
That makes sense.
I like that approach and terminology. I also like that we're keeping businesses from getting more than a year behind on their license fees. So whatever efforts we can take so that we're never more than a year behind, I think would be helpful.
That would really be my hope here. Yeah. And for the sake of trying, as Jim pointed out, to not get in the situation we've been in the past.
Right.
It was a real problem.
Yeah. I've heard about it. So to do this, not to go beyond a year, flexibility, the request to make the payment or to contact the town to come up with a payment plan before fees accrue, what action is needed by town council?
You would have to amend your emergency ordinance to take out the provision that now allows for waiver of penalty and interest effective on a certain date.
Could I bring the outreach letter to you next week and offer, if the ordinance is rescinded and the normal procedure begins again, and this is the letter that we're going to deliver explaining if anyone has any hardship, here's what to do, so that if you made the decision to rescind, you would understand how we were going to approach businesses in hardship?
And I might just at first thought make a recommendation that we do this in March, and that gives us plenty of time to reach out to these people to say,
okay,
this is what's coming. That also lines it up. March 1st is technically when those new business licenses should be due. So that would be a full year of relief on last year's licenses and would allow us to start the licensing process for next year on time.
You think you can do what you need to with a rescission effective in March? It doesn't need to be effective January?
Yeah, I think if we're going to try this approach of getting people set up on the payment plans, if there's a hardship case, my experience with having done that is that it usually takes a little bit of back and forth with the business owner. And if we're having to do a half dozen or so of those, I think it might make sense to give it a couple months, and then that gives us time to incorporate that outreach into the ordinary annual business license renewal outreach that we're doing this time of year.
Okay.
Okay. So
Um, I'm sorry, I still have the mid-year budget amendment matter. This doesn't need to be acted upon now, but it is coming up that within the current adopted budget, we did hit some of these unexpected expenditures, and we have some of the unanticipated revenues as well. So this fiscal year looks like it's going to be bigger than the 540,000 base that we landed on. Council does not have to act on this now, but it would help us to get a little bit of a check-in. Is this the kind of direction that you're going in? And if in a couple of months we needed the budget appropriation to stay balanced at a level around 600 instead of 540, how does that strike you?
Comments?
from an audit perspective, I strongly support making an amendment to the budget to reflect actualities. I do have a question about the CARES funding and the police. That has to be spent by December, so you still need guidance this month.
Yes, that if we've got about $6,000 of CARES remaining, procurement that we couldn't get completed or things that didn't cost as much as we thought they would. So if you wanted to do a final little push of CARES projects to the tune of $6,000, we could top it off, send some more money to the food bank, for example. But at this point, knowing that we can use it within the police base budget for this final 6% of what we got, my recommendation would be to keep it and use it as base budget support.
That feels comfortable to me.
Yep, maybe that makes sense. Yep.
Okay. Then we'll reconcile that.
Okay.
The other matters, I mean, as we get closer, we'll have more data and we'll be able to get more exact. All of these are round numbers now. So we can keep you posted, and at a time when there's another public hearing, we could maybe do a budget amendment then.
Okay.
Matt, I'm sorry, I just remembered as we were talking about that we actually also have 2,000 of CARES in the small business thing that we need to have a quick little check-in on after 2 of our restaurants dropped out of the food bank program.
That's included in that.
But just in terms of direction, between directing that towards more food bank relief versus more CIC relief?
I'm sorry, yeah, that's what I mean. So for example, 2 of the restaurant partnerships with Bread of Life.
I see. The 2,000 is in that 6 that you're talking about.
That's where some of that surplus came from.
Gotcha. I'm sorry.
Clear? Okay, thank you.
So I guess I'm up next, long-term financial outlook. All right, so government services at last month's meeting reported that we were looking and preparing for the capital improvement maintenance plan, which our first step was to look at maintenance, and to sort of propose 2 plans, one for maintenance and then one for capital projects. As we started on making recommendations for council, we realized we were missing several bits of very important information. Some of that was just a complete list of all of the equipment and assets that town has with their values. So we looked at insurance documents that lined that out. That's what caused the deep dive into the audit report for numbers. We are planning to meet with the auditor next month to really get into those numbers a little bit more. From that asset list, we determined what are kind of basic necessities for maintenance. So examples, we have Victory Hall. When does the HVAC system need to be replaced? How long does the roof exist? When do we need to look at elevator? Do we have an annual building inspection, right? So those are just some examples of projects within Victory Hall. For Canal Basin Square, it can be boat replacements. It could be lighting. For Farmers Market, examples could be, fixing the fans, doing annual treatments and so forth. So things that are a bit bigger than the annual budget that we review that need to be scheduled and planned for. And so they might feel like capital projects, but they're just to maintain the assets we have. As we looked at those assets, the next exercise we went through was to take our current budget and to repeat that budget for the next 5 years and to put into the budget these projects for each of the areas and the projected costs for each of the areas, just to see baseline where we're at. So if we have a current budget, we know what our annual income is, we know what our annual expenses are. Now we have this list of these are our assets we need to maintain and just keep them operational and functioning and in good shape. Where does that leave us? Unfortunately, the news wasn't so great. So where that leaves us is within the next 5 years, the quick and dirty is that we will have used up all of our reserves. We will be in deficit. And so government services spent a long time talking within our meeting about what some of the options are. And then I did a follow-up meeting with Matt Thomas, Mayor Smith, having further discussions to help guide council as we enter into not a one-year conversation, but a multi-year conversation and plan to keep the town from going in deficit, to come up with a way to bring increased revenue, what those options are, to maybe reduce some of our services so that we can balance for two approaches, and then what are other options so that we can maintain our beautiful assets, our beautiful town, and to serve our public. We do have a spreadsheet. Matt, are we prepared to share that this evening? That I just, again, want to show council members tonight so you can see some of the numbers that we were seeing so it's not a surprise to you, so that we can start this conversation. Again, Mayor Smith and I want to be real clear. This is a conversation that we're not going to solve in 1 year, but if we start now, we can solve over multiple years of efforts in terms of how do we build up reserves to take care of things? How do we start to try to make efforts to bring in some money? And it's not just one solution, there'll be a multi-pronged solution. So I do think we can get out of it, but we do need to not delay in terms of really addressing what's in front of us. So what you see before you is the current fiscal years are the columns. Matt put in all of our general base revenue. So base revenue is just defined as that pretty much it doesn't change. We rely on it. It doesn't go up and down. Some of these are options as we go into further conversations about next year's budgets and coming up with our 5-year plan, we could make adjustments to. So these are things that we may or may not be able to have an impact on, which we can get into a further discussion later, not necessarily tonight. Just below these base revenue options in blue are non-base. So these are revenues where Matt will apply for grants. So we're supporting kind of operations within the town by applying for other grant resources. So CARES, that's an emergency situation. We're providing emergency services with an emergency grant. The police, who did extra hours of policing, or there are other outreach programs that those are through grants. We're passed through for the fire department with the farmers market. So each of these are not, if we don't ask for them, we don't get them. And sometimes if we do ask for them, we're not guaranteed to get them. So I wanted to make that really clear and transparent to council moving forward. As you go further down the spreadsheet, we've identified each of the main areas that you're familiar with in terms of our financial budget. So we started with our personnel. So who are our base staff and what does that look like to maintain our current staffing levels? And then in terms of benefited staff, below is our wage staff. And what does that projection look like to keep those staffing consistent? And then each of the operational areas, so administration, the farmers market, police, flood control, economic development, parks, and what do those look like moving down? When you get all the way to the bottom, we tried to list some of our fixed assets, which I talked about, and we need to do some follow-up on that. But you see our big number in 5 years. That is our projected deficit. And that's with not changing any of our current operations.
This is great work. Thanks.
Yeah,
Really good work.
the base issue is assuming a slower economic recovery, the trajectory of revenue increase is not as steep as the trajectory of cost increase.
Right.
And there's a long list of projects that as we went through maintenance, we weren't accounting for. We don't have a plan that replaces the lawnmower and the outdoor lights and the roof. And this should fit with the experience that you've seen on council where something breaks and it comes forward as an emergency matter. Oh, why wasn't this already in the budget? That has happened several times, and that has been our practice of we fix it when it breaks, but we didn't see it coming. This is the most comprehensive approach I've seen yet of trying to get a handle on what all do we have and what would it mean if everything broke in the next 7 to 10 years. You don't know when it's going to break, but you know it's not getting any younger.
Right. So tonight, just to keep things focused, happy to answer questions as best we can, but Matt and I wanted to kind of redirect council to the project sheet just to make sure that government services and the staff that we've kind of that we've tapped on the big maintenance projects that we foresee. So this came out of both a government services meeting and a brainstorm. But we thought council might be able to think of big ticket items that we missed in terms of considering maintenance over the next 5 years or longer.
Under the flood wall there on the levee wall, what's vegetation?
Maintenance of Mink Creek, is that right, Matt?
It's up around the dam. The dam inspection report this year found extensive tree growth that needs to be cut back, brush that's grown up and some bigger trees that have grown up around the dam that shouldn't be there. So that's our write-up from our engineers report this year. We've got some pretty extensive tree and brush work to do up around the dam.
Thanks.
Yeah, I was noticing that.
Worth a try. The police department was the one that was best able to itemize what goes in a vehicle and what goes on an officer. So as you replace all of that kit, in addition to the personnel cost, these projects don't even have an inflation factor on them. This is current pricing. So we're not even getting the impact of if these things cost more 5 years from now, it's going to hit us harder.
There's also the extra consideration with them of staffing changes. A lot of those, some of those items on there, like the armor, even handguns, can come down to officer preference. And so we saw when we were doing a lot of hiring of new guys a couple of years ago that there's a built-in cost there of outfitting a new officer. You can't assume that the equipment you had from your old officer is entirely transferable.
Personal preference sizing, exactly. The new employee can't use everything that the old employee used. That's what we got. Obviously, some of those are far more important than others. Some you can cross off the list.
So I wanted to point out, you'll see that the police station is our biggest expenditure area, both in terms of personnel and equipment. I also want to point out in the streets area that we do not have the current VDOT grant included as an item. So that is still sort of pushed off to the side as we move forward with discussion.
This list also doesn't have very many at all of the aspirational projects.
Right.
Big ticket items for the future.
Right.
It started as a capital improvement discussion. We went back to basic maintenance and realized we had enough of a problem just with that.
Yep.
This doesn't get you big new parks, big new trails, big new services in any way.
Right. Right.
Does the roads and sidewalks section of the expenses here, oh, I'm sorry, those are fixed assets. Is there an expense built in here for maintaining existing sidewalk?
A little bit within the operational baseline of streets, the occasional repair of a sign or fixing a hole in a parking lot. You could do small repairs like that as a base budget.
But no attempt at sort of outlining the amount of repairs needed over the next 7 years to the existing sidewalk that we have?
No.
Not that we have, so it's a good addition.
Because I was just thinking that might be a number that would be good to consider, especially if we could kind of highlight how much of that deferred maintenance is within the affected grant area. You know, as you mentioned,
Right.
that grant's not listed on the project sheet.
Right.
That may have an offsetting expense on the deferred maintenance side.
Good.
Question about personnel, and this goes back to the police department, just because I'm not entirely clear on our paid staffing and why we do have what we have. I know some of it, but not all of it. And so if you can scroll up, Laura, just because there's a third. Okay, that's good with me. So we have police chief Bullwinkle, who is part-time salaried. Then we have 2 full-time officers.
Mhm.
The third, okay, now this makes sense to me. And that third officer is our part-time position to
Mhm.
count flex time, correct? For the other 2 officers, so they can
That's
take
right.
their time and we don't have to pay extra whatever.
So and we don't burn out.
Okay, thank you.
And as Ron mentioned earlier in the meeting, there's been an interview for a second part-time officer. So that will really start to look more like a pool of money that Jeff will be dividing up between multiple part-time officers, but the overall cost there shouldn't rise.
Okay.
Any other questions before I give you some things to think about for homework?
I know the only other question. So if you can, just to make sure the numbers, I understand the numbers we're working on here. So where's the deficit? We're in the hole in the red, yeah.
Yep.
And so the expenses there are listed. What's our expected revenue? What's the revenue based on? What's the revenue number for each year?
So the revenue is fairly consistent.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a slight inflation factor, but there's no big changes in revenue.
Matt, could
And
you
so
scroll
that-
up a little bit to the revenue from the town on this? Here are our lines, like meals tax, you see 140,000 in fiscal year 21. That incorporates the rise from 90,000 that we talked about tonight.
Mhm.
And then you see kind of a modest recovery, but I'll point out about 185. What was that, fiscal year 25? That's roughly where we were last fiscal year. So this is saying, you know, we're looking at about a 5-year recovery to get back to where we were, in last year. And the 185 that we landed at last year, I've been doing some research on, and you know, without the worst economic collapse in U.S. history that Matt described in the last quarter of that fiscal year, I think we would have come in around 200,000 in meals tax revenue for that year. So you might even say fiscal year 26 looks more like when we're back up to
Okay.
recovery in this projection.
Okay.
One last
that's
thing,
good
Laura,
to
can you
know.
scroll back down to the expenditure number, the revenue numbers? All the way down, the totals. The bottom. Oh no, the expenditure numbers. I'm sorry, because I thought I saw in one of those years that, or sorry, keep going. The revenue numbers bullet. Revenue, the total revenue.
Matt's actually driving, so.
Okay, so fiscal year 26. Why does our revenue go down there? So it's going up through 25, and then the revenue starts to go down.
It goes down because we're out of money.
We've stopped borrowing from our fund.
Ah, okay. Thank you. All right.
Well, and I kind of wanted to ask a similar question when you go all the way down to the bottom and to the deficit, and you're looking at fiscal year 21 to start with, and there's such a huge jump from 21 to 22, and then again from 22 to 23, but then it starts to even out after that.
Right.
What are the main expenditures that make that huge loss?
In this formula, it's that in the current year, we're not doing most of those projects. The identified list of projects just takes that cost and spreads it out. So we're not doing that now. So when we start doing that, it kicks it into a certain level. And then the other jump is, I think, the expiration of some grant money. And this list is pretty conservative about grants, partly because these feel like the kinds of things that we should be able to support on our own. We shouldn't need a grant application to replace a lawnmower. So saving your grant application resources for more strategic things and not relying on grant applications for basic maintenance.
Okay, thank you.
Well, you know, this has pretty much been the revenue and expenditure picture for the town as long as I've been here.
So how did we make it work?
That's both positive and not so positive, Jim.
In your experience, what did we do?
You muddled through.
Can you be more specific?
I mean, I'm serious. And it's not something that's really changed all suddenly. I mean, this basically, I mean, really just in the last couple of years, you had a capital improvements program for the first time, really this year. Right?
Yeah, we're working on this year.
Yeah, before you had nothing.
Right. Well, I think that's why we've muddled through. Is that we haven't taken care of things, so we've kind of muddled through, and when they really break, we fix them.
But it's worked, and the boogeyman has always been, you know, in the closet has always been, well, let's assess taxes, but put piggyback taxes, but you've always resisted mightily in doing that for
right.
And I don't think you've when did we expand the police department, Matt? I can't remember. We used to have 2 employees, the chief and an assistant, right? Or 2 assistants. It's always had 2 assistants.
I don't know the history. Does anyone know when that staffing level changed?
5 years ago, I think. Dan, do you?
I believe it happened while I was on council. So within I think 2 to 3.
Yeah, you increased it from 2 to 3 is my memory. And it hadn't been that long.
Yeah, no, I'm saying 2 to 3 years ago, I think is when it happened.
Yeah.
Jack, I'm gonna guess about, between 3.5 and 4 years ago, because it was before I was here too, so.
Yeah, I think it's right when I joined. You were just hiring.
Probably around 4 years.
Yeah.
No, I mean, literally, you have to take this with a grain of salt, but so you've had a history of limited tax resources, and expenditures have always been greater than your revenues, but you've always found a way to do the job, principally with safety, and then going from there. So I mean, you can be doom and gloom is my specialty, but I'm not really sure that if you look at the big picture, it seems to me that what you've done, even though you had no revenue, look at what Streetscape did. You changed the whole look of the town. It's charming looking. So,
right.
You've done a lot, So keep that in mind. That's my pep talk.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. So food for thought moving forward, now that you've had the doom and gloom and the pep talk, which we greatly appreciate. In terms of options with revenue, things for consideration, right? There is the real estate tax. There is the property tax. There is the meals tax, and there is the cigarette tax. Thomas also did adjustments this past year in terms of the vehicle tax, so that's already been addressed. We're on par with the county, but just for consideration. There are other options too. In terms of economic growth, rezoning can lead to potential more investment by local businesses. Reaching out and partnering better with our county staff in particular, which we discussed and proposed to the Board of Supervisors. We can look at restaffing, but how does that change our policing? How does that change our priorities? Are there ways that we can reduce the cost of policing? Unlikely, probably not. What are other towns doing? How are they supported by policing? How are they supported by their staff? Are there opportunities for partnering and engagement? We are looking at, again, the government services doing a deep dive with the inventory review for insurance. So there may be some positives or there may be some surprises in that process. There are also assets. So we have the assets that we care for. At what point do they become too much? And at what point do they become really worth investing in? Can we use those assets to our advantage? And if so, how? In other words, more rent, right? Or is there a future sale in our future? And are there actions that council can take in terms of partnering better with the chamber, where we just become a community that doesn't just inch by and muddle through year after year, but where we really invest our time, our effort, and our publicity to grow the town in terms of those businesses and the residents that invest in us.
Yeah, I mean, I as we're sort of having this conversation, I don't want to go too far down like the speculation about the future or planning, but I think about just practically, we have 3 special use permits on our docket that are all business oriented.
Yeah.
I think we're not currently generating revenue that will. And so that for me is good. I don't think it's going to close this hole, but that is a good sign.
It is a good sign. Yeah.
It's a good sign. I do think about promotion. And you thought of, you said assets that we could do away with. I hate to think about our non-essentials, but something like Canal Basin Square is still underutilized for what it is, and
Yeah.
we've had conversations with the county recently about getting on their tourism van tour. We need to make that's something we should be following up on to make sure that we are still part of that circuit.
Mhm.
And then with our small area plan, I think this is a place where the planning commission through zoning, and I think at our urging, could really start to move the needle. I think if part of this small area plan is getting more homes built on the west side of town, we should rezone that soon, so that we can move that. Same thing with the plant. I just read an article today or yesterday in the VML journal that comes out or whatever. Forget the name. Oh, Galax. Same situation. Factory closed down in 2008. They're doing the exact same thing. But they got a nice little article written in a publication that other people saw. So we've got the rezoning tools to do this. We've got a plan to do it. We should do it soon so that we can actually start, I think, taking advantage of the possibilities that we have through, as you mentioned, Laura, rezoning, so we can start moving the needle on people taking advantage of opportunities here rather than later.
And
Josh, will you share that article about Galax?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Economic development. So other counties and cities have dedicated staff. Stuart, you are trying to do a magic with your small committee. One of the things that we discussed with Mayor Smith and Thomas and Matt was to maybe reach out to the county and try and boost up the economic development support and plan with the county staff, so that we're not trying to do something with too little, but where we get help with professionals that really understand and can help us build that. So that was one of the sort of proactive discussions that we had. Events, we've always sort of inched by to do great events with a total local flavor, but we haven't been looking at them in terms of investment in a business of its own. And there is great potential there to also grow those two. So I do think there's some real hidden opportunities within us muddling through to really plan out our maintenance needs and not always sort of be surprised and to make that projection start to look black instead of in the red.
Mhm.
Any other questions? All right, we'll keep working on this. I just want to say a huge thank you to Matt and Thomas for helping carry out the numbers. Government Services sent them the template, but they did all the work. So a huge thank you to them as well.
Yeah, this is good. This is really good work. Really. Good.
I want to thank Government Services Committee for its leadership, and of course Matt Thomas. That whole group put this together, and it's given us all something to think about seriously. And we will be discussing it in the next foreseeable future. Anything else anybody has on their mind before we close up? All right, well, we'll see everybody next Monday, same time, same station. Thank you all. Adjourn the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Stay healthy.
Likewise.
Thank you all
Bye.
very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.